Today's teens are more driven than ever before and more overwhelmed than ever before.
We're seeing middle schoolers having panic attacks over grades, high school students who haven't slept properly in weeks, and college-bound teens who feel like their entire future depends on every single assignment.
In this upcoming episode of Inside the Teen Mind, we're talking about what's really driving this level of pressure and how it's affecting teens' mental health, motivation, and sense of self.
We'll break it down, why academic stress is rising among middle school, high school, and college, how to recognize the early signs of burnout and perfectionism, and most importantly, how parents, caregivers, educators, and clinicians can help teens build resilience without lowering expectations or sacrificing their goals.
You'll also learn what actually helps teens to stay motivated in a healthy, sustainable way, and what unintentionally makes stress worse.
Because success shouldn't come at the cost of a teen's mental health.
And no teen should feel like their worth depends on their performance.
Join us for this important conversation.
Episode 5 of Inside the Teen Mind, Managing School Stress, Burnout, and Perfectionism.
Presented by Connick & Associates and the Alive Center, supporting teens and families with expert, compassionate care.
The types of things that stress me out are piles of schoolwork, having to worry about what I'm going to bring to each of my houses, and planning ahead so I don't forget anything.
Welcome back to Inside the Teen Mind. I'm Dr. Lisa Connick, licensed clinical psychologist and founder of Connick & Associates, where we specialize in therapy and assessment for children, teens, and young adults.
And I'm Amanda McMillan, executive director of the Alive Center, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. At the Alive Center, we're a teen-driven nonprofit focused on prevention, leadership, and creating a space where teens can truly belong.
Today, we're going to dive into a topic that feels incredibly relevant right now. Teen stress, burnout, and perfectionism.
Yeah, Lisa, I see this in my own family right now. I have a kid that is a senior in high school, and I see them going through so much, right? They have a job. They have 2 different clubs that they're a part of. They have 2 different AP classes. They are just recently found out about what college they want to go to, but the stress of like applying and then waiting to find out where you're going, figuring out where all your friends are going, plus trying to do all the senior activities, the dances, the senior night outs, and also the feelings of loss of getting ready to transition and say goodbye. The other day, she was like, this time next year I'm not going to be here. I'm like, you're going to be here, just not here.
Right.
But like just being able to process that, and both of us got a little emotional, right? And what I notice is that she's a high achiever, but she just wants to sleep all the time. Every break she gets, I find her in her bed, all cuddled up, sleeping, or she'll get a lot of headaches. And, this I'm interpreting as the stress. And the fear of like possible burnout as she gets ready to enter graduation.
Yeah, and the launching to college, I can speak on a personal level, and not just for my own child who's a college student, but also from a lot of our clients at the practice, is by the time they get to post-graduation, whether that be college or vocational school or even work, they may be kind of burned out academically, and they're making a lot of transitions. There's so much pressure to know their path in life before they even hit the age of 20.
Right.
And I see stress influencing my kiddos with stomach aches, headaches, like you said, Amanda, but also kind of that just procrastination of important tasks because they're just mentally and probably even emotionally overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. And because of our background, we know what this stress looks like, right? We understand that this excessive sleeping, the stomach troubles, the headaches, it's their body that's showing that the stress is too much.
Yeah.
Right?
So what we'd like to do in this segment is to break some of this down for our listeners so that they can understand what is going on in their adolescence when they're experiencing stress, and what are some of those factors.
Yeah, today we're going to break down what the data tells us about stress and burnout, what developmentally is normal versus concerning, how perfectionism forms, the emotional consequences of constant pressure, and I might add physical consequences, and what parents can realistically do to help.
Yes. So we're hoping to give you some tips. But before we do that, we'd like to ground this in some numbers. Local data, including surveys like the Illinois Youth Survey, consistently show that teens are reporting very high stress levels, especially during the academic year, as we can all probably relate to. And that stress is related to grades, performance, and future planning.
Right. And it's not just locally. Nationally, research from the Common Sense Media shows that more than 1 in 4 teens report feeling burned out. They're emotionally exhausted, disconnected, and questioning whether their effort even matters.
And there's more. The American Psychological Association reports teens consistently describe their stress levels during the school year as exceeding what they believe is healthy. So this tells us our teens are not just busy, they're emotionally depleted.
Right. We're seeing this at the Alive Center. The teens that come there are dealing with all kinds of stress. With the middle schoolers, it's more about social stress. But with the high schoolers, I tell you, some of these teenagers have resumes longer and more impressive than mine. I mean, they're in, AP classes, they're doing different services, they're in sports and clubs, and they're also like starting their own nonprofit organizations. I mean, it's insane what these teens are able to accomplish these days. I mean, most of the times I'm like, when I was 17, I played softball, and that was it,
Yep.
And so that kind of makes me realize, like, what has been the shift from, like, what the expectations are, it was when we were teenagers versus the expectations of our teenagers now, and why they feel like they have to try to achieve so much.
I think that this is the exceptionality standard, right? We have to be exceptional. And that's the message that teens are taking on. And it is a heavy load because there is a world of social comparison. And they're seeing what everybody else is doing, and they think they need to add that too.
Right.
I need to add that to the list of things that I'm already interested in. And I think that the impact can be that they're padding their resumes with things that might not even be meaningful to them because they want to be viewed as exceptional.
Right. It's like a mile wide or and an inch deep, or like what is
that? They're stretching themselves too thin.
Yeah.
So let's talk about breaking this apart into some of the contributors that's driving these levels of stress in our current youth. So I'm going to go through these with Amanda for you. Academic intensification is one of the things that really we're just right now talking about, is that expectations have increased. Students have expectations that they have to take more AP classes. They're building their resumes early. I didn't even think about a resume until after I got out of high school.
Me for
I had
college,
and then there's that pressure early on that they must specialize. So it became why are you slacking? You got to get these done, and it really became an ugly scene unnecessarily. So I think we're all guilty of getting our own parental stress in the process and having that roll over to our kids, and they're already carrying quite a lot of stress about this.
Well, there's the financial stress of college too, right? So not to distract too much from that, but that is a real thing. So
yeah, and then there's also the social media amplification. We also still have some pandemic residual effects.
Absolutely.
So that interrupted skill development of the social interactions is still being experienced.
Yeah, I mean, one of the phrases that really resonates with me about coming out of the the COVID pandemic is that we experienced a pandemic of loneliness, right? You know, like we were forced isolation, and in some ways that was really hard for everyone, because then when we had to re-enter, there was this fear of getting sick, or like, you know, a lot of people, you didn't know if you were going to get the COVID that was just like more like the flu or was actually deadly, you know. And so some of my kids became germaphobes around that, and still have high anxiety and just prefer to be alone.
And the other thing I think that they struggle with stress management is you can block somebody on your phone.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, either you're overly plugged in, or you just block somebody when you don't want to deal with them anymore. Well, that's not real distress tolerance skills. That's not conflict resolution.
Right.
So we've got a lot of challenges that we're dealing with that lead to other stress when it comes to social interactions. So we talked about how, you know, some of these different factors contribute to stress. Let's talk a little bit, Amanda, about the developmental aspects of stress in adolescence.
Yes, we'll explore that after the break.
For me personally, I think the difference between feeling stressed and burnt out is stress is more of a temporary feeling, because everybody feels stressed sometimes, but burnout is, for me, more like when I lose motivation for something I have to do, and I feel stressed when I'm burnt out, and I also feel a mix of some other emotions when I feel burnt out.
Welcome back from the break. Now we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to start off talking about the differences between our different developmental stages. In middle school, this is where we really start to see the signs of what we might understand as typical stress, right? This is where their executive functioning is starting to emerge. Their identity is really fragile here, and it's really focused. The stress really mostly highlights around peer belonging and wanting to fit in. Middle schoolers want to be like Stepford wives. They all want to look the same, you know, type of thing. And we talked about this in previous episodes, where the problem is this is the one stage where nobody looks alike, right? I mean, because everybody's changing, developing at different stages. But it's also the first part where they start moving from elementary, where you're kind of graded on like meets expectations or exceeds, to A, B, C, D, E, F, right? A more traditional grading system. And it feels a lot more high stakes, like everything needs to be an A type of thing, right? And also there's this fear of disappointing adults, right? Because adults start treating you a little bit more like adult. You're not coddled like you were in elementary school. There's more expectations, like you need to you have homework and you need to remember your homework and you need to turn it in, and you know, these types of things that you know, they're not necessarily used to. And I know for at least myself as a parent, it was a big pain point, because I'm like, why are you telling me about this assignment the day before? Right?
Absolutely. That lack of planning. But
right.
The one of the things that I think is a problem for parents to not realize at this stage that might contribute to stress in their middle adolescence is that they have expectations that kids can do these things. And unfortunately, teachers may also sometimes have expectations that kids are good at planning. They're learning this in middle school. So please keep in mind to not expect your child to think about long-term consequences of their homework not getting done, or their exams, or their grades, or they're expecting perfectionism, perfectionistic organizational skills.
Right, because really this stage is more about learning how to socially adjust to a new type of thing. Like this is, they don't have the same teacher every year, every class. They're now changing classes every period and have different, like a science teacher and a math teacher and a, you know, so they are getting used to a bunch of different people. They usually run a lot more teams. So it's more about like developing their identity and that social component, I mean, not that academics aren't important, but that shouldn't be the focus.
And they're very stressed about their
Right.
their peer relationships during
Absolutely.
middle school. Now, if we look at high school,
Mm-hmm.
high school stress is going to be a little bit different. We see high schoolers more capable as abstract thinkers, but emotionally they're still developing.
Right.
So some of the stressors that are going to spike in high school, as we well know, are going to be around academics and balance. So we see GPAs being much more important to students. They're working on their standardized testing for college. They're very anxious about those scores in many cases, or anxious about the prep for it. They are carrying, some students are carrying a fairly high honors or AP course load. So they're balancing some high demand academics while they're also trying to be involved in clubs, in athletics, and in activities. And they're making a lot of college comparisons among their peers. Where are you going? Where are you applying at this stage? And so
Yeah, and so that's where, kind of circling back to the beginning of this episode, it can come and show up as like sleep deprivation, maybe some anxiety disorders might be starting to emerge, or components of obsessive compulsive disorder or perfectionism, types of coping patterns. All those things can kind of come out during the stage to try to have a sense of control.
yeah.
Yeah, and then we move into the college, right? So for college and vocational students, this is where autonomy really increases, and the expectation is that they, launch, right?
They're launching.
And they might have some sort of like imposter syndrome of like, I'm supposed to be adult, but I have no idea how to do this.
Yeah,
You
and we talk a lot about imposter syndrome with students because it's the idea that everyone else knows more than me, and eventually I'm going to be found out as a fraud.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because I don't know what I'm really doing, and
Yeah.
I'm faking it. I'm faking my way through this. So there's a lot of imposter syndrome as we see kids in college comparing themselves to other students and feeling short.
Right.
Yeah, they're falling short of what their peers have or are doing. So keep that in mind, that's a piece that is developmental, but it is something that's very real. And then some of the other struggles that students at this stage are likely to have are related around their identity formation as who they are as they're emerging into young adulthood. Lots of career uncertainty.
Right, like this pressure of like whatever job or college, path I choose is what I have to stick with forever.
Yeah, and there's no going back. They also are probably experiencing some burnout right now from years of overperformance. So if they were high achievers in high school and involved in lots of activities, you might be seeing your college student trying to play that same card, and it is going to start catching up with them. So we're
Right.
seeing some difficulty maintaining juggling all the plates, if you will.
Right, yeah. And then they're also just, building their own, usually a brand new social group, right, too, and relationships and all that kind of goes into that. So now with the young adulthood, now it becomes I have to succeed independently, and all of a sudden, man, I have financial stress, and it's real. Like, I have to start paying back these student loans. I have to get a job that actually supports me, ideally. Who knows? Maybe they have kids. There's this launch anxiety of being independent from their parents, and a lot of things these days are so unaffordable. Like, it's $2,000 a month just to rent an apartment in this area. Barely any jobs coming out of college pay for that, right? So there's just so much pressure for that age group as well.
And I think for perfectionistic teens, and even for maybe ones that aren't as perfectionistic, this is where we really can see burnout surfacing.
Right, yeah.
With that fear of like hopelessness.
Right, yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about stress versus burnout, and Lisa, can you help kind of like in your words help me understand what is the difference between stress and burnout?
Yeah. So I think stress, when I think about stress, we think it is time limited. So it's tied to a deadline, maybe a very tough week. if you think about your own life, you got lots going on this week, but you can see next week is going to maybe have a light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, yes.
Right? And so
just got to get through this, right?
Get through this week, get through this period of time, and then it'll be light again.
Yeah. I just need to do this one all-nighter.
Yep.
And then I'll get my stuff done, and yeah.
So even an example from my own college-age son, he said recently, Mom, I can't really talk to you this week. My schedule's really intense, but next week it's going to be lighter. Can I give you a call over the weekend? So that's him recognizing this is busy, but I'm going to have a break.
Yeah. And sometimes that stress can be good for, people, not for long periods of time, but like stress can help you perform at your best.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's giving you some adrenaline.
Right. But there's like that tipping point, right? Like where when it's sustained longer, it can really start affecting you. And so, help me understand how you define burnout.
Yeah, I think that distinction is pretty critical because some of the signs of burnout, is a deeper problem. And that's when we see a loss of motivation. We may see some signs of increased irritability, that kind of jaded perspective of what's the point, maybe some apathy involved, a lot of avoidance or a procrastination for tasks. It just feels overwhelming. And then we may see some increased physical symptoms. Amanda, you talked about this a little earlier in your kiddo. Headaches, stomach aches, physical symptoms, and then a real decline in performance despite effort. So this is where we're seeing something kind of moving into a deeper layer.
So it's really important to understand that burnout is not laziness. It's actually like this feeling of overwhelmment and like paralysis. Like it's the nervous system depletion when teens, and honestly this feels very real to adults too.
Yes,
like
it does.
I'm like relating to this right now, to some of this components, but like really losing your motivation and being like, what is the point? Being concerned about possible depression. And that's when parents need to step in more actively. Stress calls for support. Burnout may require intervention.
Yes. So as we think about this, Amanda, let's move into a discussion of what contributes to both stress and burnout, which is a good introduction here to perfectionism and what we think of as the exceptional standard among teens.
Oh, yes, please. Let's talk about this perfectionism component because this one sneaks in pretty quietly, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Perfectionism is often misunderstood as high standards, but clinically it's fear-based.
Ooh,
yes.
I don't like that.
Yeah, so think about, let's kind of go through this. So perfectionism can develop through conditional praise. So some of these factors of what contributes to perfectionism is, one is being told that you're smart when really you're just achieving. So that's that conditional praise piece.
But I like to tell my kids they're so smart.
I know, but this leads to a fear of disappointment.
Okay.
Right? So if I think that I'm only going to get praised if I'm smart and when I'm achieving and getting good grades, then if I don't get good grades, I'm not smart.
And I'm not lovable.
And I'm disappointing you.
Yeah.
Yes. So we kind of have this this is an underlying cultivator of perfectionistic. And it also, creates some anxiety sensitivity. So that sense of some kids are just very easily anxious when they're, and perfectionism helps to relieve some anxiety. If I get it perfect, I know that it's right. This pressure shows up differently across the different stages of adolescence,
Absolutely.
Amanda.
Yeah.
So let's dig into this a little bit more after we take a short break.
Sounds good.
I deserve a break to recharge after whatever hardships I've overcome in this period of time. And kind of with that recognition comes the acceptance of the fact that I am experiencing burnout, and I deserve to validate myself and appreciate the hard work that I have completed thus far. And it's important for me to be okay with taking a break and be intentional about my breaks and making sure that I'm using my rest time wisely and making it focused on myself and kind of setting myself up for what's next.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about what do teens wish that parents knew when it comes to their stress. And I think we've done surveys, and I've talked to a lot of teens about stress and, just asked them this question. And believe it or not, the answer is pretty simple, and I hear it across age ranges.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one, that parents listen. They don't try to fix it. They just listen to their teen and try to understand their perspective. Two, that they recognize that whatever stress they're dealing with, to them, is a big deal. Don't minimize it.
Yeah, good
right?
point.
Don't be like, oh, that's nothing. I have to pay bills. No, that's whatever they're dealing with is important to them, and so treat it as it's important. And third is just to be there for them as they work through it. Don't fix it for them, but be there for them and support them. I think those are the biggest things. Listen, validate, and support.
Yeah, I think it is a good point that you say don't minimize it, Amanda, because I think what we see our kids struggling with, it's like, that's going to be a small issue in the big scheme of life, but it's their first time dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a first, it is a critical point for them. And so helping them navigate the process of managing the disappointment that comes with missteps, failures, losses, is really helping us do the most important job I think we have as parents, and it is teaching kids to be resilient.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, because resilience, what exactly is resilience? Resilience is when things don't go the way that you expect them to, being able to pivot and either make something else great about it, or be open to whatever comes out of it, or learning something from it and realizing that you can get through it and you're okay.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is something that if you try to fix that problem for them, they're not going to learn themselves. The hardest thing as a parent is to see your child suffer. But that's how they learn. Because that's life, right?
And I think as my kiddos get older, and I think even working with lots of teens, they say to me, I don't want to tell my parents about this because they're going to start giving me suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not want to do it your way, unfortunately. And they may want to struggle a little bit and figure it out on their own. So we want to give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think let's take this a bit further, Amanda, and talk about what parents they're probably asking right now. Well, what do I do with this?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's give you some ideas. We have some. We cannot eliminate academic expectations, and we've talked a lot about that in our episode today. How the academic expectations contribute to stress. We don't want to reduce or eliminate academic expectations because growth requires change. But what we can do is change how we respond to stress at home.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to give you some practical ways that parents, caregivers, and supporters of teens can help their kiddos build balance, self-compassion, and sustainable motivation without lowering your standards or abandoning your goals.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. So one of the first things that you can do is recognize that your words matter. Right? So really trying to shift from outcome praise to a process praise. So an outcome praise is, I'm so proud of you for getting that A. Here's $100 to go, buy yourself a new outfit. Versus you know what? I'm really proud of how you prepared for that test and stuck with it and tried your best. You really put a lot of effort into it, and it looks like you learned a lot.
Yeah, and this wording focuses on the process that the teen took to reach the goal. So you're really praising their effort. Mm-hmm. So they're feeling like their outcome, their actions matter to reach a goal.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big shift that can be extremely helpful. Mm-hmm. And then they don't internalize the academic outcome.
Yeah, because then they're really recognizing what they did versus just remembering the grade.
Right. They're working on planning, persistence, and decision making as part of that.
Right. Yeah.
Tip number 2 is model mistake tolerance and healthy coping as a parent. Our teens are taking cues from you and the other adults in their life. They notice their parents, they notice adults, and we are setting the stages for how to problem solve and cope with stress. So I'd like parents right now to take a moment to reflect on, do you take breaks? Do you set boundaries? Do you ask for help? Or do you lecture and overfunction? And I think particularly as moms, we tend to do a lot. And we tend to juggle a lot. So I think having some self-reflection on, am I setting good examples? And if not, do I need to get some help on how to manage this better so that I am setting some good modeling for my child?
Yeah. I mean, modeling speaks louder than instruction, right? Our kids are always watching. I know that when I am stressed out, I get quiet and irritable. And like my kids will sometimes be like, "Are you mad at me?" I'm like, "No, sweetie, I just need you to know that I had a very stressful day at work and I am processing it, and my patience is really short because I'm very tired, but tomorrow everything will be fine." And so, but being able to articulate how I'm managing the stress lets them know for themselves that it might be normal if they're experiencing the same thing in the future.
The other thing I think we can model is what we call mistake tolerance for your child. So when you make a mistake, you can say out loud, "Oh, I messed that up, but I am learning from it, and here's what I'm going to do differently." So they're watching you recover.
Right.
That's seeing the resilience in action is really helpful.
Yeah. Or, "Oops, I didn't mean to do that, but oh, cool, look at this thing I got now," right? Yeah. Yeah. And the other part is encourage sustainable motivation. So to do this, ask your teen, what feels meaningful to you? Really listening to them. And what feels realistic to you for this semester? What are your goals and what you'd like to achieve? And where do you need to flex? Do you really need to do volleyball club and basketball team and 3 AP classes? Does that feel realistic to you? Or do you want to just focus on one or the other? What's most important?
And I think this is so critical that we give our kids, they're probably going to say, "I can do all that." And you may want to let them, but when they slip and they realize they're overextended, please don't say, "I told you so."
Oh, no.
We don't like that as parents. We don't like other people to tell us that. It is so much more helpful to say, "Wow, I see that you are feeling a little overwhelmed. What do you think you need to do to make adjustments in your schedule?"
And also, don't underestimate the power of downtime. Teens don't need to be busy every single second of the day. They need time to be at home, to be able to relax, to be able to do things that are healthy stress management components, to do fun and play. Those are also very important parts of development during this stage.
And that's distressed decompression from stress.
Right.
Strategies to decompress and take a break are extremely important. And those are good strategies for our kids to be able to have a part in without feeling guilty.
Yeah, and also to avoid burnout.
Yes.
Right? We have to have downtime.
Yeah.
We have to recharge.
Agreed. Tip number 4 is validate before you try to fix. Amanda, you spoke about this a few minutes ago about you don't have to always have to fix it for them. Don't tell them you'll be fine. Don't worry. That comes across as dismissive. What you can do is validate their feelings. Wow, I know you really wanted that. You really wanted to get that higher grade. You really wanted to make first chair. I'm so sorry. I saw all that effort you put in. I'm so sorry that you didn't get what you were hoping for. This is helping them to feel heard and that you recognize that this was important to them.
Yeah, and one of the best things that you can do for a parent is just sitting with them through whatever emotion. If they didn't make a certain team and they're really upset about it and they're crying, just sitting with them and letting them know that it's okay to be sad around me. I can take it. And I'm here for you, and we can get through that, and then we're family. We're always here for each other, right?
The other thing this does is it fosters that connection that a lot of parents want with their kiddos. It really fosters connection and allows them to feel safe and that they can explore things with you without feeling ashamed.
Right.
Because remember, they really don't want to disappoint you.
Right. That we love them at their best and their worst.
Absolutely.
And then finally, we want to support skill development, remembering like these soft skills of resilience and executive functioning are things that they're just developing, and we really want them to be able to practice in a safe way, and recognizing that they're not going to start off with perfect time management and prioritization of, whatever activities they have, setting boundaries with friends or activities, being able to speak up for themselves, having perfect study strategies. They're not going to do this perfectly right away. They have to practice that, and that's where you can kind of model and help them set up like times for those areas. And this is where you also might want to restrict taking away their phone at night so they're not on it too late type of thing, but so that they have structured periods of developing a routine to help them be most successful.
Yeah, and I think as we are helping our kids develop life skills, not just academic skills, this process starts in school, but it extends well beyond that. So, for example, teens are involved in extracurricular activities, sports, clubs, organizations, and work. And they have to learn how to balance these demands with their social life and find time to decompress from busy days. And their parents and their caregivers play a really important role in modeling and teaching life skill development during these formative years.
Yeah, this is where we really recommend starting early. Starting in middle school, teens can start learning essential life skills, focusing on independence, including like doing their own laundry, basic cooking. Why don't you cook with your kids, or like cleaning up together? Like have every kid have a chore that they do to do the practice life skills. Money managing. I know I started in middle school. I was like, okay, for school, this is your budget, so you can buy whatever you want within this budget, but after that, we're done. That helps them like go into a store and be like, do I really want to spend $50 on a t-shirt? Or do I want to, go to this other store where I can get, much more for my money,
Or do I want to eat this semester?
Yeah. Exactly. You can give, kids like debit cards and stuff like that through, Cash App or Venmo, whatever, that you can kind of control that. Taking responsibility of cleaning their rooms, but also, being very specific about what that looks like and setting those expectations. Safety and, around first aid, safety in public when you're, maybe they want to go out downtown and hang out with their friends without any adults. Well, what does that look like, and how do you stay safe? You give them that space, but you set the expectations for them. And if they violate that, you have to set those boundaries and discipline them and let them suffer the natural consequences. So those are some of the tidbits that I have.
Yeah, and I think ideally we want to start by having our, kids in middle school, again, like you said, Amanda, we want to start having them manage one task and then gradually adding more responsibilities so they're developing a sense of confidence and autonomy, which is preparing them for later. Throughout their course of development, and when they launch, they know how to boil water in college.
Right, yeah. And we really want to recommend to parents that they allow their teens to experience and handle consequences like forgotten homework or unwashed clothes to learn accountability. If they wake up in the morning, it's like, where's my favorite sweatshirt? Well, did you do your laundry? No. Well, you're going to have to find something else today, right? Like those are things that they have to learn for themselves. If they don't feel the pain, they're not going to make any changes.
Yeah, and I think these are small stressors that are manageable stressors in these early stages, but when they have that consequence of that, I don't have my work shirt cleaned for work. Okay, well, I guess what are you going to do about that? Rather than fixing it for them, they learn accountability, they build resilience, and they learn stress management skills.
Yeah, they're much more likely to remember if they experience something unpleasant, right? Just like I said, discomfort leads to change.
Yes, it does. And it's uncomfortable for parents too.
Right.
So the last tip I'll leave you with here is watching for warning signs.
Right, yeah.
Stress is a very normal part of life, but we do want to keep watch out for warning signs. And those might look like withdrawal from activities, chronic exhaustion, slipping in hygiene from a kid that's typically pretty on top of those things, not taking care of themselves, not taking care of their body, feeling excessively irritable, refusing to go to school, and losing interest in life overall. These are all very concerning warning signs that we want to be mindful of.
Yeah, because that's when it's more than stress. It's burnout. Your teen may be experiencing this burnout and displaying these signs of depression. And that's where they really need intervention and professional help.
Yes. So if stress does start interfering with daily functioning, like sleeping, eating, relationships, school attendance, that, like you said, Amanda, is when professional support can be incredibly helpful. And this support can be beneficial for both teens and their parents, especially if your child is still living at home.
Right, and you really need to reevaluate, like, what do they have on their plate? Is all of this stuff really necessary? So honestly, therapy doesn't have to wait till a crisis either, right?
Right, that's
just
true.
like having, someone there to help work through that stress all the time is also really help them to be preventative so they don't get to that point, because it's harder to dig out of burnout than it is just to manage regular stress.
Absolutely. And sometimes teens just need someone who isn't their parent, but who's more experienced than a peer to process things with. So that's where we see therapy can be very helpful. I'd like to leave parents with this perspective. Most teens we see who are struggling with burnout are not lazy. They are not unmotivated. They are overwhelmed and afraid. And many of our high-achieving teens are operating from a fears of failure, fears of disappointing you as their parents, and also fears of falling behind. And so what they need most at this time is not more pressure, it's relational safety.
And teens don't need their parents to remove every stressor. What they need parents to do is help them set realistic expectations, to encourage flexibility, allow for imperfection, support sustainable pacing, listen to your teen, and also check yourself in regards to your expectations for your teen. Do they have time to just play and have healthy downtime?
So if your teen is losing sleep regularly, crying about school, withdrawing from friends, becoming rigid or self-critical, or saying things like, I'll never be good enough, there's no point, that is not something that they should push through alone. At Connick & Associates, we help teens untangle anxiety from identity. We work with high-performing students who need tools for sustainable motivation, executive functioning, and healthier self-talk without lowering standards.
And at the Alive Center, teens have space to build belonging outside of performance, which is often a powerful antidote to perfectionism. Your teen is more than their GPA, more than their acceptance letters, and more than their productivity.
And success that costs mental health isn't success. We're so glad you dropped in to listen today. For more information on this topic, please refer to our blog, which is linked in the description and also posted on our web pages. And we'll see you next time on Inside the Teen Mind.